Welcome back to Live Now with Veenu Keller and Chuck Hogan. We want to welcome you to Spanglish World Network and her network on Zingo TV channels 250 and 251. Zingo TV is a free app that can be downloaded on iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire and Fire Sticks, Roku and Roku Sticks, and all TVs 2016 and forward. Live Now is a show all about finding the synergy and body-minded spirit. Please join us as we tackle intense topics of conversation that will spur your mind, steer your soul, and give you some direction. With that said, we are excited to dive into tonight's topic with you. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Live Now with Veenu and Chuck. We are so excited to be here with you guys tonight and really dive into this topic that Chuck and I, we just had this amazing adventure, if you would, in Italy together. And we were led by this incredible man named James Twyman. And when we were there, we really were talking about loving kindness and what's lacking in the world, and that there is an epidemic which was great because I was like, oh, I live in it. It's the epidemic of I have to be right. Oh, wow. I think I'm the epitome of that. I'm the epicenter of the epidemic.
we all fall prey and subject to it, my friend. It's so great to see you. It is interesting when we start to look at the metrics of what's involved with just conflict. Look at the world we're living in right now. It is, if it's in Ukraine, Asia, domestically here in the United States with an election going on, if it is in the West Bank, and it's not just, it's one nation that's surrounded by a bunch of a lot of the same belief systems, and yet can't find any accord. And it's exactly what you said, Veenu. Do you need to be right?
Yeah, and then we grow up with what I've heard growing up in my adult life was, do I want to be right or do I want to be love? And but it was interesting when he put it that way about the epidemic of the need to be right. And honestly, it separates us. It separates us because if I have to be right, that's already a presupposition that you're wrong. Then if you're not agreeing with my point of view and how I see things and my opinion and what I want to give, and if I have tunnel vision that that's the only way and you see it a different way, there's a separation right there. And so one of the things that I love that James Twyman said, and I've used it, was he says there's three things I say. And the first thing is, I don't know, maybe, I love you. And it was interesting because you remember, Chuck, when we were there, people were like, well, what about when you have all this conflict with somebody? Like, I don't know, maybe I love you. And he's like, well, sometimes you have to say that I love you in your head. Right. But then it brings us back to really resolving that conflict. And I'll say that yesterday I was in the car with my husband and we were driving back from dropping my daughter off at my mother-in-law's. And I was explaining to him. And so all of a sudden we get into this little, I don't even remember what it was. And he looked at me and he says, I don't know, maybe. And I'm like, don't forget, I love you. You can tell me that. And he's like, oh my gosh, that really does work. Yeah. Like it really does neutralize the situation.
Well, and there's a reason. We can't lay blame. We can't judge when someone doesn't know. So when someone's, and here's the deal, and this is what I started realizing, you can't just say it to say it. You can, but the challenge is going to be, is that it's going to become cliche, kind of like, love you. And all of a sudden people are going, do you really?
Well, the energy, right?
Well, and it's that presence. So I came across another phrase that Julie and I saw this comedian, and I won't ruin the story for you, but it's very simple. And he goes, I have this 4-letter phrase I use, and I found that it means I agree, but I don't agree, and I don't even know if this is real. And he goes, can you believe it? And it's kind of like what you were talking about. Someone will say something, he goes, can you believe that? Can you believe it? And they'd be like, well, no, can you? And he goes, I don't know, maybe. And so it's like, wait a second. I'm combining all these things together now. And then James had a third one. Do you remember what it was?
Yes. God, I do. It's at the tip of my tongue. It's a phrase that he says all the time after everything. Go ahead, tell me, because I'm gonna sit here and rack
So,
my brain.
and I heard him say this one, and he may have another one as well. And he goes, well, not yet.
Oh, not yet. Yeah, it was something like after he says something, something like all the time or
Right.
something.
He goes, not yet. So it's like, I haven't experienced that yet, but I don't know. Maybe. And it's like, okay, wait a second. Are we talking in a circle? I said, no. Really, what we're doing is and if we get a little NLP about this, we're doing a pattern interrupt, because what we're doing is setting an agreement frame where we're still involved and engaged with someone in connection, but there's no judgment.
Right, right.
It's what you always say, my dear friend, curious, not critical. And
Yeah,
it's like going, this is the layman's book of curiosity. I don't know. Maybe. So what are we really saying? I don't know. Well, I'm not judging it. Is it possible? Well, anything's possible. But by the way, I love you. So I'm going to continue to listen and be present and not judge. And I go, oh my gosh, how much conflict would just melt away?
well, and that's just what you said is like there's no more judgment. And that's really where, people need to be right. And then there's judgment with it. I was like involved, and I normally don't comment on people's stuff because I'm like, do I really want to get into this debate? What do I want to put my time and my energy into this debate? But I was reading someone's post, and a part of it I did agree with. Like, I'm not going to take coaching to be a millionaire when from a person who's broke. I'm
Right.
not going to take coaching on how to build a 6-figure or 7-figure business when you don't even own a business. You work at, I don't know, McDonald's, right? Like that's just not the coach I'm going to use.
Sure.
And he also said, and I'm not going to have a coach in relationships if they're single. And I'm not going to have a family coach when they have upheaval in their family. And so I thought about it. I'm like, do I really want to? You know what? Yeah, I'm going to. And I did agree with the first two, but the second one is that I know, and a lot of relationship coaches that are single by choice or because they started to learn about themselves and they realized that the partner that they chose was not the partner they wanted to be in. And they've done the work and they realized that it takes two in a relationship. And there was only one putting out
Mm-hmm.
into the relationship. And so they decided to leave. And it's not that they're not a great relationship coach. They're an amazing relationship coach and they're still single, not being pushed into being in a relationship just to prove this is how you have a relationship. And
Right.
and the other thing is I even say I'm a family coach and you as my brother from another mother know because I've talked to you, sometimes I have conflict with my kids, which then I reach out to other people to say, hey, what don't I see
Right.
being the mom and getting a coach for my kids. But I'm still a phenomenal family coach. It's sometimes it's especially as a family coach, you can't I'm a mom. I don't have my coaching
Mm-hmm.
hat on. I'm a mom. And so I do have blind spots that I'm
Oh,
not seeing, right?
listen, you don't have infrared night vision goggles, halon lights. You don't. At some point in time, we're human. And I go, oh, okay. So it's kind of like going, they're a brilliant doctor. And I go, of what?
Mm, right.
Theology, philosophy, surgery, psychology, behavioral sciences? What are they a doctor of? I go, because just because you have the moniker doesn't mean you have, and this is where it gets important, you can have the skill, but not have the perspective in that moment.
Well, they say a heart surgeon's not going to do open heart surgery on his own kid.
That's right.
And that's so my to my point, I was making this comment and then he came back and defended it. And once he started defending it, I said what I said and I put, I don't know, maybe dot dot dot. And I let it go. And then I let other people just chime in and I'm like, I'm gonna
Yep.
let it go because nothing has a meaning but the meaning you give it. And
Yes.
that's the other thing in conflict. When we're in conflict, we're giving it a meaning that you must be right, Chuck, so I must be wrong. And then I'm going to have a filter of being wrong. So now I need to prove that I'm right or I'm agreement or whatever. And I've given it a definition of that.
Right.
So we also have to just kind of say, and I love our fellow sister, Connie. She taught me this in 2015. I was in a conflict at an event with someone, and this person just like blasted me in front of the different participants and stuff. And I was like mortified. I'm like, what is going on? He's a man. He raised his voice and he's like, you did this and you shouldn't have done that. And that was my participant. And I was like, ah. And then I was like, after people went away, I approached him and I'm like, that was uncalled for. This is how it was. He's like, no, 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 no. So I went to Connie, who was our lead at that time. And she looked at me and she says, he was right. And I'm like, what? What? And she goes, he was. The way he saw it, he was absolutely right.
Right.
And she says, and you were right.
That's.
And I'm like, huh?
I know.
What? She says, because we all have different filters and we see it through our filter. So we create a story about it of how it was to make us be right, that whole pandemic about being right. And so he handled it through the filter of he was right because he was in his filter and his perception as well as you did. So what do you want to do with it? She said. And I was like, huh. And that was one of the most pivotal lessons I ever had in my life.
Mm-hmm.
That now I'm able to help de-escalate things between kids and parents by just asking that question, like, what filter do you have on? And let's just be your parent for a second. Just be your parent.
Yep.
Put those filters on and see it. And all of a sudden the kid's like, well, I guess they're not bad parents. I guess they really are trying to make me safe. And I'm like, huh, imagine that. And so all of a sudden it starts to level out that conflict.
It does. You said something that's really powerful. And I started asking this question. I said, what if you're both right? That's simple. What if you're both right? And they're like, no, you both can't be right. And I go, well, can't you? That's called consensus. That's actually called agreement. That's actually called happiness. That's actually called accord. So is it that someone's wrong and someone's right? And I said, I don't know where this presupposition came from, Veenu, that there needs to be tension or resentment, or I'll just say someone to push against.
Yeah. Resist.
That resistance creates persistence, and people will dig in with both heels in order to feel like they're not losing their identity. Because as you know, one of our mentors over the years, Tony, said one of the biggest conditions, one of the largest needs that we have is to remain consistent with our identity. And I really do believe that. There's a challenge though. Is it a made-up identity or is it really your identity? And the truth is, it doesn't matter. Because whatever you say after I am is who you become and who you are. And so it becomes really imperative to understand that if you go, oh, we're both right. And someone's like going, well, is that really true? And it's like, well, what did you believe at that moment? Well, this is what I was feeling and this is what I believed. And when you get the explanation, you go, I could see how that would feel that way to you. Now, what you didn't see
is what it felt like to me.
... Right? And you're like going, Oh, so I recently had a situation where someone that I'm very close with felt slighted.
Hmm.
And they're like going, "Oh, well, you didn't do right by me." And I was like, "Oh, okay. I'm a little confused though. How did I slight you?" And they're like, "Well, I told you I needed help." And I said, "Yes." And I agreed to check in with you every single day. I didn't say what time, but I would check in every single day. And I did. Then they came back and said, "Oh, you failed. You didn't do a good job. You weren't a good friend." And I was like, "Wow.
Rules.
Wow." I said, "Okay. So for every time you've ever needed me, and I've been there, and you and I have this kind of relationship, it's like going, I've got your back 24/7, 365. I know you've got my back 24/7, 365." And it's interesting because these people that I go, I'm tight with, I'm close with, and it's not based on convenience. It's based on I trust you, I know you, and we have an understanding about we're going to show up and just be real. You're going to give it to me straight. I'm going to give it to you straight. And it's interesting because I started realizing that people that I thought I was really tight with, one of our identities shifted.
Well, the thing is that I think that happens also. Yes, you're right. Like identity definitely changes, but I think also another thing to think about is we can know each other for years, and yet sometimes our rules change around it.
Sure.
And when we're not checking in with what that looks like,
Yes.
and we're not being specific of like, look, Chuck, I'm going to check in with you every day, buddy. Um, Maybe it's going to be every other day, but I promise you I'm going to check in. There's not an expectation of time. And yet,
No, but there's a difference though. And I love where you're going with this. And I'm going to remind you, I know this about you. You ask great questions.
I,
No, you do. And and that's how I live my life. It's not like I'm going to make an assertion or assumption. I'm going to go, well, tell me a little bit more.
right. What would it look like for you? But if you knew there was all these rules, like you thought you're just being a good friend, like, hey, I'm gonna check in on you. You didn't know that there was rules around it.
Well, I've known that this person has had rules around other people around it.
Uh,
And I've always been kind of that North Star where
right,
whatever's going on, they would come back to center. And it's like, oh, voice of reason, no
right.
judgment, not harsh, but real and honest. And so we made a determination. I'll say we, because in their actions, I just said, I will no longer be a doormat. And on the other side, I'm not a fair weathered friend.
Right.
So this goes back to what you were saying because the conflict wasn't in the other person. It was in me going, did I let them down? Was there something missing? And at the end of it, I go, I
Not by
guess if
you.
you look at it, well, and I go, hey, at the end of the day,
They're right.
I don't know. Maybe.
Maybe. And the thing is, through their filters, they're right. But through your filters of who you are and how you were showing up, you were right. And that's just it. And that's when that whole, I don't know, maybe comes in great and in handy. But let's talk about a little bit that creates these conflicts. We've already
Yeah.
said, needing to be right. But it's also the rules we put around things. And if we're not asking the quality questions of what would that look like to you? Like, I want to show up for you. What does that look like for you? And do you have an expectation of acknowledgement? Because there's a friend going through something right now, and I've been reaching out to his wife to make sure she's supported with the baby and what's going on with him. And I'm really good friends with her husband. And
Yeah, me too. I just was like, I just saw that before we jumped on, by the way.
and so I every day I'm checking in with her and she's not responding. And you know what? I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I'm so okay with that. I have no rules around. And all I said to her again today is like, I know you're busy. I'm just checking in and sending love.
Yeah.
Just so she knows someone is constantly there for her. And I'm texting him. And again, I don't have any expectations around them thanking me, them saying, "Oh, we're doing good," answering.
Yep.
This is me being who I am genuinely when I have a friend in need.
Yep.
being there. I had another friend that was going through something when I was in Africa and then in Italy because she has an ongoing thing going on. And I did my best. And she's like, you're in Africa. Can you just enjoy it? I said, but it takes me 2 seconds to text you and let you know that I'm thinking of you,
Right.
but that's the friend that I am to
Right.
my friends.
And to your point, same thing when I would text this person, they're like, oh, don't worry about me. You just enjoy Italy. And it was almost like snide.
Right. Like, but I am being nice and I am enjoying Italy, by the way. And
Right. Yes, and not an or but.
right.
And yet I started realizing some things too, Veenu, that conflict is created not just by the rules, but by the identity that they have within these belief systems that they're carrying. So, there's conflict right now in politics. There's conflict, people like going, oh, if you're a Trump lover or, Kamala lover. And I go, I'm not a lover of either one of them.
To be
I'm
honest.
just looking for people that can get some things done. And because the process, and this is a belief system, I go, the process is broken.
Right.
There's a lot of people in offices that, and I can't complain about it unless I'm willing to run for office. Or, and why do I go there? People can become so polarized that they'll start to go, oh, you Californians. And you and I are like going, well, yeah, we're Californians. We kind of grew up there.
Right. Thanks for noticing.
Yeah, you're like, good. But does that make us any less validated? And I go,
Right.
well, I don't know. There's a lot of people that live in the state of California, and I think they like it. And
Right.
so I go, but it's no different than me living in Texas or you living in the Carolinas. And it's like going, okay, why do you live there? It's not because you have to, because you've chosen to, you get to. It's where you call home. And I go, awesome. And yet, are there conflicts around that? And I go, for some people, yes. For others, no. Why? Because they live in a motorhome. They
Right.
travel all over the country. So to your point, conflicts change based on focus.
Right.
So,
And I just want to say also, because we bring up like the elections and stuff like that, conflicts create separation. When we think about the Pledge of Allegiance here in the United States, and I know that we have a lot of listeners all over the world, so I'm just talking about United States. It says one nation under God.
Mhm.
We are not one nation.
No.
We are
No.
so divided. And it's like it splits up people in families, it splits up people in friendship. And that's why they say you don't talk politics or religion. It's like, does your beliefs that strong of the pandemic of I need to be right, that you can't love your fellow person? I have so many people that believe in the opposite things for me. And I'm like, great. I'm
Yeah.
like, do you want to hear me, or do you want to hear me to have a different perspective? Because I love for you to hear you from a different perspective. I may not agree with you, but I know what you're saying is right for you.
Right.
Because I honestly, Chuck, I'm 51 now and I'm over the conflict of life. Like it just, you get to a point where it's like, when everything has to be a fight, it's like, why? And then we spend, for instance, spending that whole, you know, week with our YBL family, there was no conflict. Everyone just got along and
Zero.
and I'm like, can life be that easy?
Yes. And the truth is, yes, when there's three things: one, understanding; two, no judgment.
Yes.
It really is so beautiful to hear all the conversations that go on. And irrespective of how, and it could be religious. We were at a faith event. I mean, it doesn't get much more religious than that. We have a Franciscan friar priest who is leading our spiritual brigade in this experience. And I go, but how eloquent was he in talking about energy and 12 prayers from all different religions?
Oh, it was beautiful.
Right? And it's
And
like,
honoring each one of us for whatever belief that we had,
that's
and
the
having a
sacred.
spiritual medium there with us, right? It's like we have so many different walks of life, but in those moments, I think you said it, there was like no judgment.
There isn't. It's one of the things, And you and I've had this conversation philosophically a lot, and I actually believe it's really poignant for this conversation we're having now about judgment. And that is when we move away from seeking just like-mindedness. And like-mindedness is, oh, what are other people doing to achieve success? That's like-mindedness. It's like, show me the process. If you teach
Yeah.
me the skill in the process, then I'll be like them. And I go, no, you won't.
Mm.
It's when you find your tribe of like-hearted people. And I've had people, they go, oh, you YBL people are so weird, this like-minded, like-hearted thing. And I said, yes, I'm a weirdo and I own it. Why? I don't know. Maybe it's because who I am at my core. And I'm just looking for a lot of other weirdos like me who are going, I don't need to judge someone by the color of their skin, by their gender, by who they love, by what they love, or why they love it. I can just be a good person and know that they're a good person. And in that, we can talk about literally anything under the sun because everything, when you're like-hearted, becomes a possibility,
Absolutely.
not a criticism.
Another thing that you said that I really feel like we need to touch on, which I think is beautiful, is the accountability.
Ah,
Accountability of like, yeah, that I that's me. That's what I believe. And with accountability can also become openness. The openness to hear someone else and not wrong them for what they believe. It's we shouldn't have to walk on eggshells to share our voice
no.
because we might offend someone because they have a different belief and they need to be right. And it's going to, and again, that's one of the things that creates conflict is that you have a different belief than me and I have a strong opinion about it. So I'm going to share it. You're
Mm-hmm.
going to receive it and you're like, oh God, no, she's wrong. That is so wrong. So now you get a stronger belief and you got to try to impose it on me to change me. And when I think you're doing that, then I'm going to go back. It's just a ping
Well,
pong match.
and you bring up a great point, and that is when we take something that is what we'll call variation and we make it opposition.
Mm,
And it's like, no, they have a varying opinion from you. And I go, that's not an opposing opinion to you. It's just a varied opinion. And so, what if we were more open to recognizing differences when they pop up? Because here's the truth, we're more alike than we are different.
right.
So, we can sit here and go, well, here's all the things that we agree on. I go, no, these are the things that we have in common. Yet, what gives us character, what creates polarity in relationships, as we know, is the differences. It's not all the same stuff.
What creates the growth between us?
It does. But here's the crazy part. And you know this in relationships because you see this all the time. The same stuff that you love about your kids and your spouse and in your relationships is the same stuff that absolutely drives you nuts.
Oh, for sure. For
It's
sure.
like, I love their high energy. Oh my God, could you just tone it down?
Right. I love that she's so curious. Why does she ask me so many freaking questions every day? Like about the
Right.
same thing. Right. But I love the curiosity. Love it. But the thing is that when we can embrace the differences of people in life,
Mm,
my husband and I, because his work schedule is crazy and his travel than mine, we realized like the last minute that we weren't going to have much time together. And so we're like, well, why don't we just go to Vegas and see the Dead and Company before they're off tour? And he's like, really? Because that's not my music. Um, but it wasn't about that. It
right.
was going to a place where he would love to go see them at the Sphere and me being a part of that with him and just being open to it. And guess what? I learned to appreciate the music
Yeah.
after 2 nights of it. But it was it was more than that. I opened myself up into my husband's model of his world
Yes.
and really got to feel like why he enjoyed the music and stuff. And that's what I'm saying is that you could have such differences, but when you're open and you're willing to receive that other person's ideas and ideologies and beliefs about things, it really starts to able to shift who you are and what you believe in. And that's where we can resolve conflict. If we're more open, we're not judging. And it goes back to that, I don't know, maybe
Right.
I love
And
you.
It really is, and it has kind of an air of the Ho'oponopono to it, but without the hairy fairy aspect to it. You
Mhm.
know, it's and people go, why? Because it's like, I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, thank you, and it makes a lot of sense, but it's also a little bit um, more spiritually driven. This is very pragmatic.
It is.
And it's so easy that it's something that you can teach to kids. I mean, and it's empowering because every time you say it, at least this is what I've been experiencing when I've used it. I go, well, do I know or do I really not know? Because if I'm just saying it to be coy, or if I'm just saying it to be have the inference of being polite, I don't know. Maybe.
Well, I think, Chuck, when if you and I were in a conflict, I I really don't know if I'm
I,
100% correct. I mean, I know from my filters, but if
mhm,
I come from that energy and I'm like, I don't know, and I really don't know if you're right. I think you're wrong, but I don't know. You could be right. It's going to come off in a sincere way, and it's not coming off as just something to just push you away or neglect the conflict. It just
right.
really, and that's what I think he says, which it's a matter of neutralizing it and saying, like, I'm stepping away from the pandemic of needing to be right.
Yes.
Because whether I'm right or I'm wrong, nothing's going to change but our relationship if I keep battling it. So why, if I want that relationship with you,
Hmm.
why would I want to be so right that I shift our relationship? Why would I not just concede to, I don't know, maybe?
Well, and there's an agreement frame that comes from this that I love, which is no one, there's no admission of guilt. There's no admission of right or wrong. There's no judgment or I'll say handing down a ruling on whether someone's living a congruent lifestyle or not. And yet we get to decide at the end of this. It's like, okay, maybe in this reason for this season, we don't need to be as tight right now because there are some things that you're experiencing. It doesn't mean that you pull away, it just means that I don't have to judge the journey that you're on.
Right.
I can be a loving, supportive entity because it's not my journey. I'm
Right.
a part of it, but I can be an advocate and not the punisher that thinks I have to be the motivation to kick you in the butt to push harder and make faster change. Because to your point, next month I'm going to turn 59. Holy crap, it's been going fast. And I'm like going, okay, this is interesting. I feel great. And on the other side, I go, but I'm all about drama reduction.
Right.
There's so much of it going on, and I am amazed at how many people can only feel connected to an energy when they're living in a dramatic energy. It's not okay. They're it's like they don't know how, and I'm not trying to be coy or judging when I say this, but I really don't understand why they can't have a fruitful, meaningful relationship. And they talk about it all the time. Oh, I'm great at this. I'm great with other people. Well, when it comes to me, and I said, well, you just described 99.9% of the people on the planet. And yet, this person cannot be in a relationship
Yeah.
because something always comes up. And I go, you know what's weird about that, Vinu? I don't know of any relationship that constantly doesn't have something coming up.
Right. You know what I started doing also is like the ones that have constant, like even with social media, the ones that have constant drama that I'm always drawn to going, oh, what are they complaining about now? Oh, they don't have money again. Oh, they're on a trip today. Oh, nope. 2 weeks later, we don't have money. And it's just an ongoing thing. I'm like, I get so sucked into it. And finally I'm like, I've just got to delete that. I'm like,
Yeah.
it's creating no positive anything for me. I have nothing to share with them because they're gonna discount it as judgment. So they don't want to hear it unless you're agreeing with them and giving them something, you know? And I'm just like, I can't, I'm at like you said, like I'm just done with the conflict and the drama. And so getting rid of it. But I also wanted to make a point to the whole agreement frame. You know, one of the things that because I have the honor of teaching hundreds of people on how to coach. And one of the things that I teach about is conflict resolution and using the words that I can appreciate what you're saying.
Yes.
And I will say that was not my intent. So it's not, again, being coy or sly and trying to just you know to make them feel better, but it's like, if you are a friend of mine and I said something to hurt you and you come back to me and say, Vinu, yeah, that really sucked, I didn't appreciate that at all, and it will sting me. So one thing that happens is we get embarrassed and we try to be like, oh, no, 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 that's not what I meant to do, or you took it the wrong way, or you shouldn't have done that, and it's the you again. But instead of just saying, you know what, Chuck, I can appreciate that's how you felt from what you've told me. And that was not my intent to hurt you at all. And if I can reframe what I was trying to say, because it really was not about what you were saying, and I don't want to hurt you. So that's not even a saying I'm sorry for what I'm saying. I'm just saying I'm sorry you felt that way. As my friend, I don't want you to ever feel that way. And I appreciate how you're feeling. And this is what I want to say. And I'm going to tell you that has resolved probably 90% of conflicts that I've ever had once I learned that agreement frame. It's just
Oh.
to appreciate, and it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning of this talk tonight, was that he was right, I was right through our filters.
You're both right.
Can we just appreciate that he was right and just appreciate? And that was not my intent.
It's interesting you say that, because we say this in a cliche way all the time. And yet when we're living in appreciation, there's no judgment.
So true.
And you just perfectly stated that in a very graphically defined way, that when you're living in that state of appreciation, and I'm going to remind us as well, when we're in appreciation, there's accountability.
Mm.
And we can unwrap that for a second and go, okay, well, what do you mean? Well, when we acknowledge that I had a part in this, but I'm also rooting for you. So it's like my motive and my intention was never to be disconcerting, rude, impolite, overbearing, judgmental, questioning. My intent was to be caring, kind, conscientious, clear, present, honest, and open. And yet I did not, I'm going to be accountable. I did not present it well, or in an energy at that moment that connected. And for that, I own it and I apologize.
Right.
That simple act, because what we're really doing at that moment, and this is where the accountability comes in, is we're setting it free for both of us.
And you're not saying I have to be right.
No.
I'm not defending. And I'm going to tell you, like, most of the conflicts that happen at home between the parents and the kids, someone's defensive.
Yes.
Someone's defensive. Someone's on the defense. If
Yep.
someone's on the defense in a conversation, you're already separated.
Oh,
Already separated. So if you want unity in that relationship, you want unity in that struggle, it's hearing what the other person's saying and somebody finally saying, I could appreciate what you're saying.
yeah.
And that was not my intent.
It's very interesting. We had a conversation today about this, and it's centered around, there are all these young adults now where I know you were out of the house at an early age. I was out of the house at an early age. And it's,
Oh,
I was like, see ya. And yet I look at it, and we've created such a space where the kids know that they can always come home. And I believe this because, yes, and I didn't know any better at the time, and I thought this is what I was supposed to do.
right.
So as uncomfortable as it was, I mean, I remember my first place had I think it was a futon, or I might have, been able to go out and afford a mattress, but didn't have a headboard.
Right.
Yet I got all my sheets and everything, so it actually looked nice. And I had a sofa, and I think I had maybe 3 or 4 place settings, and that was it. That was like, the rest of it was appliance. I had a refrigerator, a microwave, I had a stove, I had an oven, and I kept my place clean. Why? Because I didn't have to worry about a whole lot. But I took pride in this, and I look at that, and why does that bring me to now? And I said, part of it is that when we come home from Italy, and it's dark 30, we get home and it's like going, oh, the house wasn't a pigsty, but it was not what I would call clean. And I'm like going, well, and Julie and I are up anyway. So we're like going, okay, so what does she start doing? Dishes. What do I start doing? Picking up, fixing the pillows, doing all this stuff. And I go there for this very simple reason, and that is I didn't judge though, because I know the kids had a lot going on and we had a lot going on, and we were just happy to be home. So to your point, what if we just took a moment to breathe and slow the frick down?
Mm-hmm.
Where everything doesn't have to be this 5-alarm fire. Fix it now, fix it now, fix it now, fix it now.
The rush of life.
Listen, that this time pressure, as Deb Battersby would call it, by comparison to time clarity or time magic. And I go, I like that. I like that because now judgment happens in haste. And oftentimes judgment or triggering happens from anchors. And then we'll start to dogpile all the resolutions behind it and all the justifications behind it. Oh, this happens every time. Oh, this is, what I go, well, time out. No, that's not true. Sometimes that happens. But Chuck, why does that happen? I don't know.
Yeah, when we put on the every time, all the time, we negate what was even said because now we're too busy defending it wasn't all the time. It wasn't every time. It was literally a few times.
Right.
So, I think our words play a big role in this and what creates that defensiveness. And if you handled it without judgment, it's like, well, we're up. Let's figure this out. The kids have been busy. We're busy. We're up. Let's figure it out. Then that's great. And if it wasn't, I don't know if I would have handled it that way, but good for you.
Well, and the deal is this. I started realizing more and more going, I'm going to get what I'm willing to tolerate as well.
Exactly.
So if we're not setting a clear frame
of what the expectations
are, the expectation is, and as we have Cole's home, and he's working diligently on getting a full-time position and doing his thing. And I go, awesome. In the meantime, you're picking up another part-time job to go along with your part-time job. Why? Because you have responsibilities. Mm-hmm. And your responsibilities are not my responsibilities. Mm-hmm. And this is the handoff that I know you've experienced with, Connor and your boys. But with your twins, it's a very different experience because they're still at that age of, I'm learning, I'm growing. What does that look like?
Right. Right now we're in the accountability phase.
Yes. And it's a ongoing process because they're also living in that age of what I call the push and pull.
Yeah.
They're trying to see exactly how much they can get away with and also what pulls them towards certain things as well. So the whole risk rewards, when I do this is what results. And I go, because the truth is in today's world that there is a lot of judgment and it's happening all around. Our educational systems are rife with judgment. Where do you place in your class?
Right.
What's your ACT score? Are you ranked as a soccer player? What's the work that you've done as a singer or as an artist? Or it's like, for the love of Pete.
And it's the definitions that we give it too. If you're number one in your class, you're the best. You may be the best at academics, but are you the best at who you can be when it comes to treating people that nicely, when it comes to, responsibility, the accountability. And that's why I think it's so important that we teach accountability, because both my boys moved out at a young age. And for whatever reason, I mean, they did have the circumstance, you live by my rules or you can move out, and they chose to move out. They didn't want my rules, which is fine. Good for you. And they've made it. And the same thing for the twins. I think that we make it also so easy for the kids. Like if they got to come back, they got to come back. But for how long and for what. And people say, well, it's because it's so expensive to live out in the world now. Well, you know what? Back when you and I left our house, it was expensive back then for that time of when we were living, you
Hey,
know?
listen, minimum wage, like what they just passed in California, $20 an hour. I'm like going,
Well, here in North Carolina, it's still 725.
yeah, guess what it is in Texas? It's the same thing. And so it's one of those challenges where you go, Texas, one of the fastest growing states, and people can't afford to live in the environment. And
Right.
it's like, wait, so you got to drive 20 minutes, half an hour, 40 minutes, burn all that fossil fuel, or take a train or a bus or what, yada, 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 because you can't live where near your minimum wage job is. And it's like, oh, this doesn't make any freaking sense.
Well, you know what? I love that you bring this up because that's another conflict, right? Conflict doesn't just have to happen between two people and our understanding
Oh,
and our
no.
rules. Conflict can also come with the fact that there's problems. But I love something that Marie Forleo said. I'm butchering her last name, so sorry. But she says everything is figure outable. If it's a problem, it's figure outable. You can figure it out. And if you can't, it's not a problem. She goes,
Yep.
my dog died. I can't solve that. That's not a problem. But
Right.
me commuting, that's a problem. Figure it out. And that's what we need to do. Like with conflict resolution, it really comes to that point is how are we equipping our kids, the people around us,
Hey, I
to
will
take
tell you.
stock in figuring out things instead of sitting in
Yes.
they're sitting in their stuff and playing the victim, waiting for people to figure it out for them instead of taking that responsibility. And that's why I'm saying, like, it's accountability. My son's complaining about how people are treating him. I'm like, but did you show up your best? Because your coach is saying you didn't show up your best today. And so is it possible your teammates saw that and felt you weren't putting your best? And then you took it personally. And it's like, if you show up as your best and they still say things to you, then we can support you in figuring out a different strategy. But when you're not showing up as your best, you're not just letting the team down, you're letting yourself down. And we're moving through that at this
Yeah.
age at snail's pace, I might add, but we're moving through it. Uh,
Well, you know
and
my family motto, right? You
if
could
you're
be
not,
doing you could be
yep,
doing your best, never being your best. When you're being your best, you'll always do your best. And the truth is this: when you are giving it your all, when I mean, like, and when I say you're giving it, it's not just in your physicality, it's in your emotion, your spirit, and you're just like, there are gonna be some days you're low energy. There's gonna be some days that your gas tank is like
empty.
teetering on empty. And I go, okay, you can adjust your emotions, your state, and your focus.
Sure.
So I go, I may not be able to run as fast as I normally do today, but when the ball comes to me, I'm going to be a smart player today.
Right.
And so part of this is knowing what we get to do in those moments and not feeling like we're forced to have to do stuff. And
Right.
this becomes really important because we live in this Amazon world, my friend, and it's very instantaneous. It's very 21st century. If you want something, you order online, the universe delivers it to your friggin' doorstep.
Yeah. So to my point with trying to teach him about what he's going through is taking accountability will relieve the conflict as well.
Yes, it
Because
does.
we are emulating our energy out. And sometimes you get back what people are receiving from you. And so if you want to resolve that conflict, it's the accountability. And it took him a while because he's like, oh,
Mhm.
but it wasn't me. And I did this. And then all of a sudden it was like, I get this note from the coach saying something different. He's like, oh, yeah, about that. I say, yeah, let's talk about that and own that. And so tell me what you're going to do better. I can't control anybody else, and either can you.
Yeah.
But you can control how you show up at your practice next week. So tell me what that looks like. Because I want my kids to learn how to resolve the conflict within themselves before
Yes.
we start trying to resolve the conflict outside of us. And
Beautiful.
that's where conflict resolution really comes into. And again, it's teaching him I don't know, maybe I love you.
And the love you is when you're looking in the mirror too.
Oh, absolutely.
So what if you actually did those three responses to yourself? And this is what if we when we start teaching this to kids it's going to really, really, really change the narrative as to around how people can start to see themselves. Because
For
that
sure.
lack of self-love is such at an epidemic level right now.
Well, I think it's a whole nother show talking about the conflict that resides in ourselves and how we could start to be self builders instead of self beaters
Love it.
and let that resonate in the world. Thank you again, my friend. It's been an awesome another segment.
Appreciate you, my friend. Great to see you.
You too. See you next week.
Take care, everyone.
Us on this episode of Live Now with Veenu Keller and Chuck Hogan. Follow us on Instagram at Veenu Inspires and at Chuck Hogan Now. For more about Veenu, please visit VeenuInspires.com. And for Chuck, please check out YBLNow.com. This show can also be heard on Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out SpanglishWorld.ca for all your news and programming. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it.